Sienna, you're wearing linen? To a black tie event? Someone should have told you this isn't a college picnic. That was Evelyn Caldwell speaking, lifting her wine glass in front of dozens of guests, not bothering to lower her voice. It wasn't just a comment. It was a gilded slap. A blow wrapped in civility, with humiliation as its target. If you've ever stood in a room full of familiar faces and still felt like the outsider, if you've ever been mocked for not fitting into the mold they built for you, stay, because this isn't just a story about being humiliated. It's about the woman who quietly signed every paper they never bothered to read, and then made the entire ship turn around. The paper glinted under the morning light, sharp and smug in its weight. I'd seen it coming. Last year, they stuck me near the buffet trays, just out of frame from the family photo that Evelyn later posted on every platform with the caption, "Legacy is everything." My fingers brushed over the thick envelope. The golden ink was carefully deliberate, not a scribble. A message. The family seal pressed into wax made it official. The 40th annual Caldwell cruise was underway, and once again, I was the stain they wanted airbrushed out. Ping. An email. I didn't need to open it to guess the sender. But I did. From Evelyn Caldwell. Subject: Invitation. Clarification. Sienna, this year's cruise is limited to high achievers only. We hope you understand. Family first? Always. Always, unless that family doesn't make you look good in a photo. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. Not a call. Never a call. Janice. Maybe this is a good time to focus on your future? That one stung more than Evelyn's veiled elitism. My future was the very thing I'd been building while they played charades on yachts. And it wasn't some abstract goal anymore. It was signed, sealed, and about to dock. Literally. Across the room, Natalie appeared silently, holding a neat stack of documents. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes flicked once to the crumpled invitation, then back to me. All set. Ocean Vista has completed their review. The Maritime Lux acquisition contract is ready for your final signature. I stood, brushing invisible lint from my tailored blazer, and walked to the desk. The papers sat like an arsenal of quiet power, page after page of silent revenge. I picked up the pen, signed the final page, and closed the folder with calm precision. From my window, the harbor sparkled. There, docked at Pier 47, the cruise ship, their ship, shimmered in the sun. The Maritime Lux. 40 years of family legacy about to sail without me. They'll board the ship tomorrow thinking they booked it, I murmured. And they'll be right, until they realize I bought it first. Natalie didn't flinch. She knew better than to ask when the plan began. She had only ever seen it move forward, never backward. I turned away from the window. Schedule the helicopter. And Natalie, remove my name from every visible manifestation. She nodded once. No logo, no title, no trace. I wouldn't be present on paper, but the ripples, they'd feel those long before they saw me coming. They always talked about legacy like it was something you inherited, not something you built. 3 years ago, I sat stiffly at the end of the long mahogany table in the Hamptons estate, fidgeting with the hem of my linen dress. The candlelight flickered against the glassware, and the only sound louder than the cutlery was the drumming of my heart. I've been exploring sustainable alternatives for cruise ships, I said, forcing my voice to stay even. Cleaner engines, waste management, regional impact programs. There's an opportunity. Evelyn didn't even look up from her wine. Darling, it's sweet that you're interested in boats, she said, her words sugar-coated like poison. But leave the real ventures to those with teeth. Brandon chuckled. Maybe you can blog about it. And Chloe, ever the echo, added, It's cute that you're still trying to impress grandmother. I'd never felt smaller. That night, under the stars and stifled laughter, something inside me snapped. I didn't cry. I excused myself early. But from that moment on, I started keeping receipts. Not the financial kind. The emotional ones. Now, as sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the Ocean Vista boardroom, I folded the freshly printed Forbes article across the table, letting the title catch the light. Ocean Vista, Quietly Rebuilding the Seas. Natalie leaned in with a knowing smirk. I assume that's not a coincidence? Hardly, I murmured, still staring at the headline. Two corporate lawyers sat across from me, composed and clinical, while Natalie recapped logistics. Every asset under Ocean Vista Holdings has been legally reassigned. You own the Serenity and the full Maritime Lux portfolio. One of the lawyers confirmed. All previous leases have been dissolved. NDAs are in place. Staff have been fully briefed. My fingers brushed the edge of the table. Real wood, not laminate. Everything about this room screamed permanence, purpose, the exact opposite of how I'd been treated in that dining room years ago. They'll be welcomed aboard by smiling staff, hors d'oeuvres, champagne, Natalie continued. And the illusion, I said, that it's still theirs. Until? She asked. Until they notice the flags, the uniforms, the name on the manifest. Natalie flipped a tablet around. On the screen, a digital copy of the official ownership transfer. I stared at the signature at the bottom. My name, bold and unmistakable. The Serenity is yours, ma'am. Completely, Natalie said. I let the silence stretch, not out of hesitation, out of reverence. This was the culmination of every slight, every dismissal, every moment I was told I wasn't enough. I rose from the chair slowly, walking toward the window. Below, the harbor buzzed with its usual rhythm, oblivious to the reckoning approaching. Let them arrive, I said quietly. I want to see them strut on the board like they still own the world. They came dressed like monarchs, oblivious they were about to be ruled. The luxury terminal at the Port of New York shimmered in the early summer light, polished floors echoing under designer heels and Oxfords. The Caldwells arrived in separate black SUVs, each stepping out as though cameras were rolling, though no press had been invited. That didn't stop Chloe from posing anyway. Chin up, sunglasses oversized, one foot angled for effect. Where's the staff? Evelyn snapped, scanning the entrance. I requested expedited boarding. The clerk at the front desk didn't flinch. You'll find your boarding passes here, ma'am. Evelyn waved a gloved hand. I asked for the owner's suite. Evelyn Caldwell, please double-check. Chloe elbowed her brother Brandon while scrolling her phone. Did you see my pre-board vlog? 12,000 likes already. Brandon was too busy adjusting his cufflinks, frowning. Cabin 3024? That can't be right. That's near the engine, Evelyn muttered, eyes narrowing. I'll fix it. Brandon strode forward, all inherited bravado and zero experience. There's obviously been a clerical error. My grandmother always books the top suite. The clerk's smile didn't falter. All cabin changes were finalized by the new owner, sir. I'm afraid the allocations are locked. Evelyn's lips pursed. What new owner? This is a Caldwell tradition. Brandon turned to Robert Caldwell, who had been unusually silent. Dad? Robert glanced at the clerk, then back at Evelyn. Maybe the cruise line changed management. That's impossible, Evelyn said flatly, voice rising. We've held this event for 40 years. Inside her private suite on Deck 10, Sienna sipped her tea slowly, the bitter warmth grounding her. She stood in front of a bank of screens, each streaming live footage from various security cameras on the ship. The boarding area flickered on the main feed. Evelyn was red-faced. Brandon was pointing. Chloe was pouting. The ship's engines hummed faintly in the background. They're confused, Natalie said beside her, holding a tablet, and getting angrier. Sienna smiled, just enough to show the edge of a plan. Captain Whitaker confirmed the Caldwells were placed in standard premium cabins, Natalie continued. 3 decks below, none with balcony access. Perfect, Sienna said. Any pushback from staff? Not yet. All signed NDAs. Half the crew doesn't even know who the Caldwells are. They will, Sienna murmured. On the screen, Evelyn was still protesting, Chloe filming, Brandon gesturing wildly. The clerk handed over keycards, unmoved. The camera's microphone didn't catch every word, but it didn't need to. They're walking into Act 1, Sienna said. Natalie glanced at her. Want to hear them up close? Sienna didn't hesitate. Start the audio feed. I want to hear Evelyn process proximity to reality. The hum of engines has a way of shaking illusions loose. The vibrations were faint, barely perceptible to most. But Evelyn Caldwell had always been attuned to discomfort, especially when it dared suggest she wasn't at the center of comfort itself. She snapped upright in her narrow bed, silk eye mask askew, as the low rumble beneath the floor reminded her. This was not the owner's suite. She stormed out into the hallway of Deck 3, heels clicking sharply against the polished floors. A young steward looked up, mid-towel delivery. You there? Evelyn barked. Is this some kind of mistake? I reserved the owner's suite. I have been sailing Caldwell-class cruises since before you were born. The steward nodded respectfully, unbothered. Cabin assignments were finalized per directive of the ship's owner, ma'am. Evelyn blinked. I am the ship's owner. Caldwell Maritime has been... I believe that changed hands, ma'am, he said, still calm. My orders are to ensure your comfort in 3024. Shall I bring extra pillows? She waved him off, incensed. The nerve, the impudence. Something was off. Very off. And it reeked of betrayal. Meanwhile, Sienna sat cross-legged on the sofa in her private suite, bathed in the soft light of morning and the crisp chill of sea air wafting in through her open balcony. The hum of the ship's motion was steady beneath her, a lullaby of vengeance well calculated. Legal says the guest manifest blackout is complete, Natalie reported, tablet in hand. No staff can disclose passenger history, and the public records show the cruise chartered by a shell company you own. Good, Sienna said, sipping her espresso. Let them have their fantasy for now. On the secure call screen, 2 attorneys from Ocean Vista appeared, framed against a glass-paneled conference room. We've pre-cleared Tidefall Cove for full VIP access. Your holding group now owns 70% of the resort facilities. Sienna leaned forward slightly. And press inquiries? Rerouted and neutralized. Your name won't appear in any coverage until your directive says so. She paused, gaze distant. No interviews, no mentions. This isn't revenge. It's a correction. Natalie nodded, swiping through the event schedule. Welcome dinners tonight. Shall I prep the script for the host? Sienna's smile was measured. Let's make it memorable. They called it the captain's table. Tonight, I call it mine. The dining hall of the Celestia Serenity shimmered under chandeliers that mimicked starlight, casting golden halos across linen-draped tables. Waitstaff moved like clockwork between guests adorned in designer gowns and tuxedos, laughter clinking against crystal. At the long central table sat the Caldwells, polished and preening, as if nothing in the world had ever threatened their legacy. Evelyn reclined at the head of the table, lips pursed. This wine is too warm, she muttered to no one in particular. Someone fetch the sommelier. If this is what passes for reserve stock, we've officially declined. Chloe, draped in a gown meant more for camera lenses than comfort, held her phone at just the right angle. Welcome to Cruise Day 2, she purred into the lens. Still no suite upgrade, but at least the lighting here makes me look iconic. Brandon leaned back, arms crossed. $400 a night and I'm 2 decks below sea level. Disrespectful. Their voices wove a tapestry of entitlement, layered over decades of unchallenged power. But tonight, that thread would snap. Hidden behind a frosted panel at the far end of the room, I waited. The music dimmed, the dining room lights lowered by a fraction. A subtle shift, but enough to gather attention. Captain Whitaker approached the microphone with the practiced poise of someone used to controlling storms at sea and storms in ballrooms. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice carrying through the hushed hall. Tonight we are joined by someone very special, The owner of the Celestia Serenity is aboard and has chosen to dine with us at the captain's table. The silence that followed was rich and uncomfortable. I stepped forward. My heels clicked against the marble floor. 1 beat, 2, then 3. The rhythm slicing through the stunned quiet. Faces turned, eyes widened. The room shifted on its axis. Evelyn's fork paused midair. Chloe's phone wavered in her grip. Brandon sat up, stiff. I reached the table and met Evelyn's gaze, unwavering. "Good evening," I said, voice calm, unwavering. "I hope the wine's improved." Chloe's mouth parted. "Wait, what?" Brandon leaned forward, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "You?" I slid into the seat beside Captain Whitaker, the seat reserved for the ship's owner. The center of power, the epicenter of legacy. "Yes," I said clearly, letting the weight of truth settle over them. "The one you excluded, and now own everything you're standing on." Somewhere to my right, a glass shattered. No one turned. Evelyn's fingers clutched her napkin like a lifeline. This is a stunt." I smiled, soft and slow. "No, Evelyn. This is a statement. Power isn't loud. It's printed in 6-point font in a clause they never bothered to read." The soft rustle of paper was the only sound in the owner's suite that morning. Sunlight poured through the tinted windows, glinting off brass accents and the cool screen of Natalie's tablet. I scanned the documents one last time, the fine print gliding under my fingertip like a current pulling me forward. Indemnity clauses, executive overrides, non-disclosure protocols buried so deep they were practically fossils. I had spent years learning their language, and longer learning how to weaponize it. "You covered every angle," Natalie said, not as a compliment, but as confirmation. "Every crew member is under a binding NDA. Guest data is anonymized. Maritime Lux waived final ownership rights when they outsourced management in 2022. I nodded. "And Evelyn signed off?" 2 years ago, during a quarterly trust renewal. Page 17. Of course she did. Back then, the Caldwells still thought they were untouchable. She hadn't even read it. Meanwhile, on deck 3, Evelyn slammed her phone down on the vanity. "Unreachable? How can the board of Maritime Lux be unreachable?" Brandon lounged on the small love seat, arms crossed, scrolling through a flurry of tweets. "People are saying the ship's changed hands, but there's nothing official, no press release." "Of course not. This is a PR ambush. Sienna's trying to embarrass us." He rose, irritated. "Then maybe stop playing into it. We need to take control back. I'm going to the concierge." "Demand full Caldwell treatment," Evelyn snapped. "Suite upgrades? Spa privileges? Let's see how she reacts when we take back our ground." On the upper deck, a steward quietly restocked a coffee station near the ship's cafe. 2 guests whispered nearby. "Did you hear? The owner's a Caldwell, too. Sienna." Not according to Evelyn. Funny. The name's on the staff registry now. In the suite, Natalie adjusted the holographic display to bring up a clause highlighted in pale blue. This line here: "Final beneficiary and title holder reserves authority to reallocate maritime assets at discretion," was included under Schedule D. I smiled. The trust gave me what they never did: legal leverage. The call with the Ocean Vista legal team was brief. "No breaches," they confirmed. "Everything's by the book." I stood, slipping on a blazer. "Then let's keep turning pages." Later that afternoon, Natalie knocked once on Evelyn's cabin door before entering. Evelyn sat rigidly, tea untouched. "This," Natalie said, handing over a single-page summary, "is the trust amendment you authorized. 2 years ago, it transferred asset discretion to Sienna." Evelyn's fingers trembled as she read. "You used our own trust against us." I stepped forward from the doorway, calm and measured. Number I simply treated it like you would have. Brandon stormed in behind me, red with anger. "I'm calling the press." Natalie didn't flinch. "Good. We've prepared a press kit." On a ship this large, secrets don't echo. They travel. It began like steam slipping through a vent, whispers in hallways, glances that lasted a second too long. At first, it was nothing. A chuckle at the breakfast buffet. A raised eyebrow from a crew member delivering champagne. But by mid-morning, rumors had curled into every corridor of the Celestia Serenity like smoke in a sealed room. Chloe was the first to sense the shift. She leaned against the bar on Deck 5, filming a slow pan of her mimosa and complaining to her followers about the lighting. Behind her, 2 bartenders prepped for the brunch rush. One muttered, "That woman from last night? The new owner, did you catch her name?" "No," the other replied, lowering his voice. "But someone said Caldwell. Same as the family." Chloe stiffened, the corner of her mouth twitching. Across the ship, at the crew mess, the story took another form. Apparently, she bought the Serenity months ago. Quiet deal. Even the captain didn't know until last week. A waitress added, "And she's been watching them all along, from some private suite." By noon, passengers speculated over scrambled eggs and imported pastries. A Caldwell coup. Someone laughed. "It's the best drama we've had since the Monte Carlo mix-up." In the owner's surveillance suite, I watched the feed split into 10 glowing panels. Lobbies, dining decks, casino lounge. Calm faces, curious eyes. Nothing violent. Just energy shifting, power slipping beneath skin. "They're talking," Natalie reported, tapping her tablet. "Everywhere." Even Evelyn Stewart hesitated before pouring her tea. I looked up from the contracts I was annotating. Let them talk. We could send a controlled statement, blunt the impact. No. I stood and crossed to the window. The ocean shimmered below, vast and unmoved. They built an empire on closed doors. Let's see what happens when the walls start whispering back. Natalie didn't argue. She just adjusted the lighting behind me so the cameras wouldn't catch my silhouette. Chloe wasn't done playing detective. That afternoon, she slipped away from her family's usual haunt and ducked into a side corridor near the ship's spa. I was on my way back from a briefing when I saw her, leaning casually against the wall. Too casual. "You've been lurking," she said, arms folded. "Ever since we boarded." I didn't break stride. "Enjoying the ocean air?" "Cut the crap, Sienna. What are you really doing here?" I stopped, met her gaze, saw the years of smug superiority begin to tremble. "Exactly what you never let me do. Leading." She blinked as I walked past her, heels clicking like punctuation marks in a sentence she hadn't finished reading. Natalie was waiting at the suite. "They're calling an emergency family meeting in the casino lounge." They gathered thinking it was a strategy session. I let them think that. Until it wasn't. The casino lounge pulsed with artificial glamour. Red velvet chairs, gold-trimmed slot machines flashing in synchronized chaos, and the low hum of illusion. Evelyn sat at the center table beneath a blown glass chandelier, her spine straight as a blade. Brandon slouched to her left, scrolling through his phone with the anxious swipe of a man seeking control through notifications. Chloe sat farther off, arms crossed, lips pursed. Robert, as always, watched silently, sipping something neat. "This ship was ours," Evelyn began, voice clipped. "It still can be, if we handle this correctly." Brandon muttered, "We call the Ocean Vista Board." "Demand a review. There has to be a way to void the transfer." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Unless you plan on traveling back in time, Brandon, that ship has literally sailed." Evelyn ignored her. "Sienna's overreaching. She made a scene at dinner. She embarrassed us in front of guests and staff. That's cause enough for censure." Brandon perked up. "Yes, public disturbance. Maybe grounds for liability." Robert placed his glass down gently. "You do realize she owns the vessel?" "On paper," Evelyn snapped. "But Caldwell assets don't shift overnight. She leveraged the trust. I'll have the lawyers dig." Chloe scoffed. "What lawyers?" "She paid most of them off. The only people left on our side are the ones who still think Evelyn runs this show." "She does." Brandon insisted. We just need— No, she doesn't. All eyes turned to Robert. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, the calmest he'd ever looked in a Caldwell room. Evelyn built a name. Brandon inherited it. Chloe wears it like an accessory. But Sienna, she's the only one in this family who's built something real. The silence that followed was fractured only by the warble of a distant slot machine win. Chloe's voice cracked. You're siding with her? I'm stating a fact, Robert replied. She didn't scream for a seat at the table. She bought the table and the ship it sails on. Evelyn stood, furious. You're defending betrayal. I'm recognizing achievement. From the surveillance suite above, I leaned forward, watching the ripple. Natalie glanced at me, silent. My hand hovered over the microphone panel but didn't press it. Let it sit, I thought. Let it burn just a little longer. Brandon pushed back from the table. We can't just let her win. There has to be something. Leverage, scandal, old contracts. She's been 10 steps ahead for years, Robert said. She's not even a Caldwell anymore, Chloe hissed. She changed everything. Her business, her name, her alliances. But not her blood, Robert replied quietly. And certainly not her resolve. Down below, Evelyn sat again, slow and rigid, like royalty caught in the wrong century. I looked to Natalie. Her tablet showed a blinking green dot. The lounge feed, live and recording. It's time they meet their host, I said, formally. Nothing says I win like pouring champagne into a glass they thought was theirs. The sky lounge glowed under a palette of late sunset gold, the horizon stretching like a silk ribbon behind glass railings. A jazz trio swayed softly in the corner, playing something light, deceptive in its elegance. Waiters in white gloves moved between guests, silver trays balanced with flutes of chilled Veuve Clicquot. Evelyn stood at the head of the room in pale cream, hands clasped as though in command. Her voice, airy and public, drifted through the murmurs. Welcome all. It's an honor to have you join us aboard the Serenity, as a Caldwell tradition. The captain cut in gently, microphone in hand. And we're especially grateful tonight to the woman who made this voyage possible. Our benefactor, Miss Sienna Caldwell. A ripple tore through the room. Guests turned, glasses paused midair. Evelyn's smile didn't crack, but her jaw twitched. Chloe froze by the mirror wall, her phone slipping from her grip. Brandon blinked, confused, as the captain stepped aside. I moved forward from the shadows, heels quiet on the marbled floor, each step cutting through memory. I passed Evelyn's shoulder, the same one I once brushed past, ignored, while carrying trays at her birthday gala. She had laughed that night with her back to me, saying, "Some people just don't know where they belong." Tonight, I knew exactly where I stood. I reached the central platform. A glass waited. I picked it up. Golden bubbles rose like applause. Good evening, I said smoothly. I'm honored to welcome you aboard this vessel, and this evening I'd like to propose a toast. The room held its breath. To family, especially the parts it tried to cut out. The line landed like a velvet dagger. Brandon flinched. Chloe turned and strode toward the balcony, her heels striking too fast. Evelyn didn't move. Only her fingers, tight on her glass stem, betrayed her. Cameras flashed, guests uncertain whether to sip or stare. Natalie appeared beside me without a sound, a sleek folder in her hand. She passed it discreetly as I lowered my glass. We found something, she said under her breath. Evelyn's fund wasn't just mismanaged. It's missing millions. They taught me money was power. Turns out paper trails are deadlier. The hum of the onboard server room was steady, almost meditative. Rows of LED lights blinked in rhythm, hiding secrets that had survived in shadows for years. Natalie stood beside me, fingers flying over the touchscreen table in my suite's makeshift war room. The sun had long set outside. All that remained was blue light and cold facts. These, she said, pointing to a cluster of offshore transactions, were funneled through the Caldwell Foundation for Maritime Education. But the IPs and timestamps? They route through Evelyn's personal assistant's laptop. I leaned in, scanning the stacked layers. Cayman transfers, ghost vendor invoices, recycled EINs from dissolved nonprofits. It was all there, encoded arrogance masquerading as tradition. She didn't even try to hide it, I murmured. She thought no one would ever look. Natalie tapped again, pulling up the video call. An Ocean Vista IT analyst, young, sharp-eyed, and half-buried in cables, gave us a grim nod from his server cage. We cross-referenced the withdrawal patterns. There's a repeating cycle every June and November, always following family board reviews. She laundered her access through internal accounts Ocean Vista used for maritime grants. One of them's flagged by the IRS now. I didn't blink. My hands were still, my mind cold. She stole not just from me, I said slowly, but from every young innovator we could have funded. From what this family pretended to stand for. The room was silent except for the pulse of data loading, one ghost after another, exposing Evelyn's elegant fraud. Natalie exhaled. Should we prep legal? I nodded. Notify Hastings. Quietly. I want the paperwork sealed until we decide. An hour later, I returned to my suite. The door was closed, but something pale was folded and slid beneath it. I stooped and retrieved the envelope. Inside, a single sheet, written in sharp ink on thick paper. Careful what you burn. It might light you up, too. I stared at the note for a long moment, then crumpled it slowly. She didn't just exclude me. She stole what could have been mine, and everyone's. Natalie returned with a soft knock. I held up the folder, then the note. Let's draft a press release, I said, voice calm. But not yet. Let her sweat. They wanted luxury. I gave them exposure. The ship's media suite had once hosted lectures on coral conservation and winemaker showcases. Tonight it pulsed with a quiet current of tension. Lights dimmed, cables fed into encrypted servers, and the screen behind me flickered with paused frames of time-stamped video. Clips from hallway cameras, staff body cams, financial audits. Each one a puzzle piece in a picture Evelyn had never meant to be painted. Natalie sat beside me, voice steady as ever. 2 journalists on board, one from the Ledger, one from Cruise Line Insider, both pre-cleared with our NDA shell drop. The dossier's ready. Release it, I said. She tapped a key. Across the ship, 2 anonymous emails landed silently in inboxes, marked urgent. Inside, years of transaction trails, doctored documents, and footage Evelyn once believed lived behind sealed doors. By the time the evening tide rolled in, whispers had turned to murmurs to questions. In the casino lounge, Brandon tried to control the air. It's absurd, he said to a knot of guests and half-interested staff. This is sabotage. None of that proves anything. But a screen near the bar, meant for trivia night, had been co-opted. A paused frame showed Evelyn berating a cabin steward, waving a wine-stained napkin. The subtitle read, "You serve us because we fund this ship. Don't forget who signs your checks." One of the guests glanced at Brandon. Wasn't that fund under her name? Brandon stammered. It's old footage, taken out of context. Back in the media suite, I stood quietly as the journalists reviewed footage I'd curated. The man from the Ledger looked up, his brows knitting as he traced a red-inked line from a dummy account in the Seychelles to Evelyn's personal estate fund. You mean to say Evelyn Caldwell defrauded her own shareholders? I'm saying, I replied, that your headline writes itself. Natalie slipped a thumb drive across the table. Includes backups, secondary validation, and a list of witnesses who've been contacted under whistleblower protection. The woman from Cruise Line Insider looked at me long. Why now? I didn't smile. Because until now, they thought silence was a legacy. A low chime interrupted us. Natalie checked the tablet. The cruise received formal notice. Ocean Vista Legal is on board. And Evelyn? She hasn't left her cabin. Her assistant says she's not feeling well. I nodded. Outside the porthole, the ocean stretched dark and vast. Somewhere below, the engines hummed, steady, relentless, honest in their movement. I turned to the camera crew we'd brought in under the guise of a tourism feature. "Let's take a walk to the engine room," I said. "It's time for some background." There's no need to scream when silence can destroy reputations faster. The silence on the upper dining deck was a different kind of loud. Chloe sat alone at the far end of a linen-draped table, her fingers trembling over her phone screen. Every attempt she made to shift the narrative only seemed to compound the damage. Screenshots surfaced faster than she could delete them, and trending hashtags painted her as complicit or clueless. Neither was flattering. The day before, she'd live-streamed a just family toast with Evelyn in full command. Now, that same video was circulating alongside frozen frames of financial misconduct. Comments were brutal. "Nepotism's finest," one said. "Luxury fraud in heels," another. Sienna watched the ripple unfold through a discreet monitor in the legal suite. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth was doing all the work. Brandon paced near the ship's secure data center, phone pressed to his ear, voice rising with each unanswered call. "She can't hide in there forever," he muttered, glaring toward Evelyn's private stateroom. But the door remained closed. No staff entered. No voice responded. Inside, Evelyn sat cross-legged on the floor, ink-stained hands gripping torn pages of the trust agreement. Her trust agreement. Shredded clauses clung to her silk skirt, remnants of a legacy she no longer controlled. A knock echoed once, then silence. Robert stood quietly at the bar, a drink untouched before him. When Natalie approached, he looked down at the mahogany. "She forged the trustees' sign-offs," he said quietly, "to cover a 6-figure hole, maybe more. She said it was temporary, just until Ocean Vista settled the dividend." Natalie said nothing, only nodded and stepped away. The message would find its place. Downstairs, Sienna's phone buzzed, a text from a crew member she didn't know personally. "She's tearing up the contract you gave her." She looked at the screen, then out toward the harbor horizon. No rage, no victory smile, only precision. Chloe, now disheveled, had locked herself in the spa suite earlier after another viral takedown. "Social media can't handle nuance," she screamed to no one in particular. Someone outside recorded that too. Brandon returned to the upper deck, sweat dotting his collar, red-faced and cornered. "This isn't a fall from grace, it's a free fall." The words hung in the humid air. Later that evening, a cream-colored envelope appeared at Sienna's door. Natalie handed it to her without a word. The seal was thick. Inside, subpoena papers, the ink still fresh. She scanned the letter once, then twice. "You're being summoned," Natalie said softly, "as a witness and a beneficiary." The only thing deeper than their lies was the ocean beneath our feet. They had transformed the grand ballroom into something between a courtroom and a theater. Long tables replaced the dance floor, and legal pads now covered the space once reserved for champagne flutes. The stage bore no band, only microphones, documents, and the unblinking eye of a camera. Every moment was being recorded. Evelyn entered flanked by 2 legal aides, her posture a fortress of denial. Brandon trailed behind, visibly rattled. Sienna arrived last, not late, just perfectly timed. She wore navy silk, hair pinned back, no jewelry, confidence made flesh. The arbitrator, a former federal judge, addressed the room. "Today, we open arbitration on Caldwell Maritime Holdings versus internal trustees. We proceed with documented evidence and sworn testimony." Evelyn stood. "These are family matters. They have no place in such a setting." The arbitrator replied, "Then perhaps they should not have been buried in shareholder funds." Natalie played the first clip. Evelyn's voice, sharp and unmistakable, pressuring Robert to sign an amendment blind. The timestamp was damning. Robert sat in the witness chair and confirmed the footage. Brandon took the stand next. When pressed about large wire transfers to consultants, He blinked rapidly. I I thought it was a normal expense. Marketing, maybe? I don't control Evelyn's office. But the transfers were to your account, the arbitrator noted. Gasps rippled. Chloe was conspicuously absent. Sienna approached the lectern, her documents neatly stacked. She outlined the trust structure, the dormant clauses Evelyn ignored, the ownership markers hidden within legal appendices Evelyn never read. I didn't steal it, Sienna said, her voice calm. I inherited the oversight they neglected. The arbitrator took a pause. Then, based on this evidence, your control over Caldwell Maritime Holdings is revoked, effective immediately. Evelyn clutched the side of her chair. Brandon stared like a boy caught stealing. Sienna didn't gloat. She stood, met Evelyn's eyes, and said, You said I'd never be one of you. You're right. I'm something more dangerous. I'm free. No one moved. The room wasn't just stunned. It was leveled. The camera crew panned across faces, documenting every flinch. Even the guests, once insulated by wealth and decorum, sensed they were witnessing something historic. The unmaking of an empire, not with fire or fury, but with footnotes, timestamps, and silence. The arbitrator rose. Further action regarding asset redistribution and criminal investigation will proceed according to maritime and federal jurisdictions. For now, this arbitration is closed. The gavel didn't echo. It thudded. Sienna turned slowly. Natalie stood in the corner, unreadable but firm. The legal team gave her a slight nod through the glass partition. They had what they needed. Brandon collapsed into a seat beside Robert, who didn't look at him. Evelyn remained upright, still clutching the folder she had once handed to Sienna like a leash. The tide had changed. Outside the ballroom, sunlight glittered across the ocean surface, mocking the polished illusions now sinking in its wake. Sienna didn't smile. That would come later. For now, she only breathed in the moment, the quiet aftermath, the final chord of a long overdue reckoning. Her phone buzzed once more. A text from the firm. Press alert ready for distribution, awaiting your cue. She typed back one word. Hold, because there was still one thing left to say. And Evelyn needed to hear it up close. Sienna walked the perimeter of the room, heels tapping a slow rhythm on the marble tiles. Her presence demanded attention without words. Guests parted as she passed, unsure whether to offer sympathy or awe. She paused beside Evelyn, their shoulders almost touching. You spent decades teaching us that legacy is preserved through control, Sienna said softly. But you never learned that trust is the only currency that holds its value. Evelyn didn't respond. Her jaw tightened and her gaze fixed forward, unseeing. I didn't burn it down, Sienna added. I just turned on the lights. She stepped away. Robert rose as she passed him, giving her a slight nod. Not of apology, but perhaps, finally, of recognition. The musicians began to pack their instruments. No one noticed. The audience had already dispersed emotionally, leaving behind only the weight of realization and retribution. Back in her suite, Natalie was waiting. The post-arbitration release is ready. We'll notify the board within the hour. Sienna nodded. Let them breathe a bit first. I want them to live in the silence. Outside, the sea rolled on, indifferent, eternal. You said I'd never be one of you. You're right. I'm something more dangerous. I'm free. Closure isn't clean. It's the ripple after the ship has passed. The docks were already humming when the Serenity eased into her berth, cutting through morning mist like a memory refusing to fade. Reporters lined the waterfront, their cameras gleaming beneath half-drawn umbrellas. Microphones pointed forward like bayonets, but Sienna wasn't interested in a battle. Not today. She stood at the top of the gangway, still as the ship behind her. No fanfare, no entourage. Just Natalie by her side, holding a leather folder against her chest like a ceremonial artifact. They're going to want statements, Natalie said. Sienna nodded. Let them want. She descended the steps slowly. With each footfall, the voices below rose. Questions hurled like confetti. Ms. Caldwell, did you orchestrate the takeover? Is it true about the fraud? Will you be pressing charges against your own family? Sienna met no gaze, gave no word. Her silence was eloquence. Her walk, rebuttal enough. Natalie handed her the final asset file. Everything signed. Serenity's yours, dock to mast. Not just mine, Sienna said, her voice low. Everyone who believed in something better gets a piece. As they reached the landing, a car door opened further down the dock. Evelyn emerged in tailored black, flanked by no one. No staff, no family, no power. The press didn't even notice. She paused for a second as if searching for Sienna's eyes, but Sienna didn't offer the courtesy. She turned her back, gracefully. The Ocean Vista executive waited beside a modest SUV. He extended a hand. Impressive execution, he said. We'll talk expansion soon. Maybe the Mediterranean next. Maybe, Sienna replied, shaking his hand. But not before I sail this one myself. They walked together for a few more steps before parting. Sienna veered left, Natalie beside her. The ship loomed behind them, sun catching on its nameplate. Celestia Serenity, owned and reimagined. Sienna stopped, letting her eyes trace the letters. They won't forget this ship, she said. Natalie grinned. Neither will you. Sienna exhaled deeply, the kind of breath that clears more than lungs. That clears legacy. As they moved toward the waiting car, Natalie asked, Would you do it again? Sienna didn't hesitate. Yes, but this time I'd start with the truth. Just before stepping inside, she glanced back one final time. The ocean sparkled, indifferent and infinite. The press, realizing no soundbites were coming, began to speculate among themselves. The silence Sienna offered had a sharpness to it. Every unanswered question became a mirror. One young reporter lowered his mic. That's not the look of revenge, he muttered to a colleague. That's the look of someone who's done hiding. On board, crew members stood quietly by the rails, hands folded, eyes respectful. Someone rang the ceremonial bell once. No script, no cue. Just a sound to mark passage. As Sienna walked past them, a few nodded, one mouthing a silent, "Thank you." She returned it with the faintest lift of her brow, acknowledging not just the gesture, but the weight behind it. Natalie opened the car door. Before entering, Sienna pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photo, one taken 10 years ago during the last family cruise. She was in the background, half-cropped, blurred, forgotten. She folded the photo once, then twice, and slipped it into her coat. Not to discard, but to carry differently. Closure, she whispered, isn't about forgetting. It's about finally choosing what to remember. Then, with the city behind and the sea ahead, she stepped into the car. She didn't wave. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. I was never meant to be a passenger. The bridge was quieter than expected, a hushed cathedral of instruments and sea-bound intention. Dials blinked softly. The horizon stretched ahead like a promise never made but somehow kept. Sienna stepped onto the polished deck, heels muted against the metal. The crew turned as one, not with fear, not with awe, but with the calm acknowledgement reserved for a captain long chosen. Owner Caldwell. The first officer greeted with a subtle nod. Sienna returned it with a quiet authority. At ease. Captain Whitaker stood near the helm, hands clasped behind his back. She's steady, he said, gesturing to the ship. Responds like she knows who's guiding her now. Sienna looked through the wide window. The water glimmered gold. She does. For a moment, no words, only the rhythmic pulse of engines beneath their feet. An echo of movement, of control taken, then directed. Natalie entered, holding a tablet. We've drafted the scholarship paperwork. It's ready. Sienna glanced at it, then back toward the sea. Let's finalize it. Within minutes, her signature appeared on the bottom of a new document. Partial ownership transferred to the Ocean Horizon Fund, earmarked to sponsor young women in maritime innovation. A legacy worth steering, Natalie whispered. Later, as twilight embraced the upper decks, Sienna walked through the final farewell gathering. No speeches, no chandeliers, just warmth in the hum of conversation and relief in the silence where old power once loomed. Guests toasted quietly. Crew exchanged nods and stories. Near the starboard railing, Chloe sat alone, arms wrapped around herself, gaze locked on the darkening sea. She didn't speak, didn't rise. But when Sienna passed, she didn't look away. That was enough. At the bow, wind pressed against Sienna's coat. She leaned into it, chin lifted, hair pulled back by something older than ambition. Natalie joined her, holding a flute of sparkling water. They never saw it coming, Natalie said. Sienna didn't answer. She didn't need to. A soft chime rang through the ship's speakers, and Sienna's voice, composed and clear, carried through every hallway, suite, and deck. "To our guests," she said, "may you disembark not just rested, but renewed. This vessel sails under new command, not of ego, of intention." Murmurs followed, smiles, a few knowing glances. Natalie turned toward her. "Is this the last cruise?" Sienna shook her head. "It's the last cruise I take without charting the course myself." The sky dimmed into hues of amber and violet. Crew lights flickered on, not harsh, but welcoming. The ship breathed. As the final line of passengers retreated below deck, Sienna remained at the railing. Her hand brushed against the cold brass edge, the same way it had, years ago, when she stood hidden behind Evelyn at the ship's christening, told to stay silent. Funny how they once banned me from this cruise. But I never planned to stop here anyway. The ship had docked, but the storm had already passed. One that didn't rattle the sea, but uprooted a legacy built on silence. For years, they mocked her absence from the table. Now, she owned the bridge they thought unreachable. Justice didn't shout. It signed contracts, released proof, and dismantled power, one clause at a time. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth.